Simulan mong abutin ang iyong pangarap na magbibigay dangal sa iyong bukas. Ang suliranin, hindi laging nandyan, dapat mong harapin. Kami iyong kasama sa bawat takin, magkaakbay nating lulutasin. Dito sa Fernandino Teens TV, ang boses mo ay mahalaga. Dito sa Fernandino Teens TV, ikaw lagi ang bida. Ang mga aral ay ginintuang atin ng bawat guro na siyang gagabay sa iyong pagkamulat. Naway umukit ito sa iyong isipan, maging mapanuri, sundin ng wasto at nararapat. Kagandahang asal ang ipakita, ipadama ang pusong may malasakit. Dito sa Fernandino Teens TV, ang boses mo ay mahalaga. Dito sa Fernandino Teens TV, ikaw lagi ang bida. Sakali mang tayo'y subukin ng unos, ating haharapin ng walang takot. Sasamahan ka ni Fernan at Dino, ang bagong barkada mo. Dito sa Fernandino Teens TV, boses mo ay mahalaga. Dito sa Fernandino Teens TV, edukasyon mo'y sigurado na. Dito sa Fernandino Teens TV, boses mo ay mahalaga. Dito sa Fernandino Teens TV, edukasyon mo'y sigurado na.
Fernandino Teens TV.
Guys, bumisita ako kanina sa mga paggawaan ng face mask. Ang galing! Pare-parehas ang pagkakagawa ng mga disenyo at sukat.
Alam mo, ganyan din ang mga napapanood ko sa YouTube pagdating sa product manufacturing.
Alam nyo ba na tungkol dyan ang ating pag-aaralan ngayong araw? Application niya ng triangle congruence.
Wow! Mukhang exciting ang discussion natin sa mata. Tara!
Let's watch and learn!
Good morning, Fernandino Teens. Welcome to Fernandino Teens TV Season 2. I am Sir Danniben Dulla, and I will be your mathematics teacher for today. Join me as I discuss triangle congruence postulates and the AAS theorem. Our objectives for this session are the following. First, state and illustrate SAS, ASA, SSS congruence postulates, and the AAS theorem based on the observations on different triangles. Second, identify the corresponding congruent parts of congruent triangles. And third, determine the additional corresponding parts needed to allow us to apply SAS, ASA, SSS congruence postulates, and the AAS theorem. Are you ready, Fernandino Teens? From Euclid to today, this shape has helped form history. They are present wherever we look. From the Great Pyramids, churches and landmarks, buildings and bridges, to nature, and even in our national flag, we can find it. Fernandino Teens, will you tell me on the comment section what geometric shape is it? Correct. Today, let me take you back to the world of triangles. Triangles are one of the most essential geometric figures. If you ever wonder whether two triangles are congruent, then this lesson will help you know the answer. But first, let us define some terms that we will use in this lesson. Two triangles are congruent if their corresponding sides are equal in length and their corresponding angles are equal in measure. Remember, we are going to compare two triangles. Corresponding sides are the sides that are paired given two triangles, while corresponding angles are angles whose vertices are paired between the two given triangles. If you see this symbol, it is read as corresponds to, while this symbol is read as is congruent to. When two triangles are congruent, then we often mark corresponding sides and angles like this. Remember, similarly marked sides and angles are congruent with each other. In this example, let us name the congruent triangles and the congruent parts based on the markings. Let us begin with the congruent sides. Can you help me identify the congruent sides, Fernandino teens? Great! The congruent sides are as follows. Line segment BE is congruent to line segment CE. Segment CD is congruent to segment BA. And lastly, segment AE is congruent to segment DE. How about the congruent angles? Very good. The congruent angles are as follows. Angle D is congruent to angle A. Angle C is congruent to angle B. And angle E is congruent to angle E because they are vertical angles. Therefore, based on the markings, triangle ABE is congruent to triangle DCE. Let us have another example. Given the congruent statement, triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF, can we identify the corresponding parts? Yes. Let us list the corresponding parts of these congruent triangles. The corresponding angles are as follows. Angle A corresponds to angle D. Angle B corresponds to angle E. Angle C corresponds to angle F. And the corresponding sides are as follows. Segment AB corresponds to segment DE. Line segment BC corresponds to line segment EF. Segment CA corresponds to segment FD. So we can also identify corresponding congruent parts of two triangles by the congruence statement itself. Take note, two triangles are congruent if and only if all their corresponding parts are congruent. But do we need all six? Correct. We do not need all the parts to tell that the two triangles are congruent. Let us see how we can verify if two triangles are congruent using fewer pairs of congruent corresponding parts after the break. We will be right back, Fernandino teens, so stay tuned.
Ang Schools Division Office City of San Fernando, Pampanga ay kaisa ng Department of Education sa pagsasagawa ng mga proyekto at programa na tumutugon sa mga pangangailangan ng mga mag-aaral. Inilunsad ang Division Call Center for Tutors and Guidance Counselors upang magbigay ng educational at psychological assistance sa mga mag-aaral, magulang at stakeholders ng Division. Kaya, kung may nais kayong itanong tungkol sa pag-aaral, maaaring magpadala ng mensahe sa Division Call Center for Tutors and Guidance Counselors Facebook page o tumawag sa mga numero na makikita sa ibaba ng inyong screen tuwing Lunes hanggang Biyernes sa ganap na alas 8 ng umaga hanggang alas 6 ng gabi. Maaari rin kayong sumangguni sa ating guidance counselors na nagbibigay ng guidance and counseling services. Lahat ng inyong ibabahagi ay mananatiling confidential. Ang nasabing programa ay nagsisilbing daan upang malaman ang feedbacks ng stakeholders para matulungan ang ating divisyon na mapagbuti pa ang mga sumusunod na programa. Ano pang hinihintay ninyo? Tumawag na sa aming mga numero o bumisita na sa aming Facebook page at magpadala ng inyong mga katanungan.
Fernandino Teens TV.
Welcome back, Fernandino Teens. Before the break, I have told you that we can verify when two triangles are congruent using fewer pairs of corresponding congruent parts. Are you ready? I'm sure that you are. Before we study the postulates and the theorem that give some ways to show that the two triangles are congruent, given few numbers of corresponding congruent parts, let me first introduce the parts of a triangle in terms of their relative positions. First is the included angle. Included angle is the angle between the two sides of a triangle. Included side is the side between the two angles of a triangle. Got it, Fernandino Teens? Let us begin with the SAS congruent postulate. This is also known as the side-angle-side congruence postulate. If two sides and the included angle of one triangle are congruent to the corresponding two sides and the included angle of another triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. Take note that we need the two sides and the included angle. Example, let us determine if the SAS postulate can be used to prove that the given triangles are congruent. For example A, in the comment box, comment a heart emoji if we can use the SAS postulate to prove that the given triangles are congruent, and sad emoji if not. Correct. The answer is a heart emoji. Because from the figure, we know that segment BD is congruent to segment CD. Moreover, the two triangles share the same side, so segment AD is congruent to segment AD by reflexive property. And since angle BDA and angle CDA are found between the congruent sides, then we can say that they are congruent. Hence, they are called included angles. Therefore, we can use the SAS postulate to conclude that triangle ABD is congruent to triangle ACD. How about in letter B? Heart emoji as well. From the illustration, we know that line segment EF is congruent to line segment HI. And line segment FG is congruent to line segment IJ. We also know that angle F is congruent to angle I. And since they are included angles of the pairs of congruent sides, therefore, we can use the SAS postulate to conclude that triangle EFG is congruent to triangle HIJ. Fernandino teens, we just have studied the first postulate that has helped us prove congruence between triangles. This time, we will be introduced to another postulate that involves the angles of triangles more. This will also assist us in proving triangle congruence, just like the SAS postulate. So let us look at our next postulate. The ASA congruence postulate, or the angle side angle postulate. If two angles and the included side of one triangle are congruent to the corresponding two angles and the included side of another triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. In this example, let us determine if the ASA postulate can be used to prove that the triangles are congruent. In the figure, angle A is congruent to angle X. Angle B is congruent to angle Y. Line segment AB is congruent to line segment XY. And these are included sides of the pairs of congruent angles. So we can conclude that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle XYZ by the ASA congruence postulate, because the two corresponding pairs of angles and their included sides are congruent. In this example, we can also conclude that the two triangles are congruent by ASA postulates, because the two pairs of angles are congruent and a pair of included sides are congruent. Angle C is congruent to angle D. Angle H is congruent to angle L. And line segment CH is congruent to line segment DL, which is an included side. Therefore, triangle CHI is congruent to triangle DLI. Did you understand the postulates I introduced to you, Fernandino teens? I hope you did. At this juncture, let us discuss the third postulate, which is the SSS congruence postulate, or the side-side-side congruence postulate. If three sides of a triangle are congruent to the corresponding three sides of another triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. To illustrate SSS congruence postulate, consider the following figures. As we can see in the figures, as indicated by the markings, we can identify the corresponding parts of the two triangles. Help me identify the congruent parts, Fernandino teens. Write them down on a piece of paper. Are you done? All right. From the figures, we can identify that segment AB is congruent to line segment DE. Line segment AC is congruent to line segment DF. And line segment BC is congruent to line segment EF. Therefore, triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF by the SSS congruence postulate. It is very simple, is it not, Fernandino teens? We just need 3 pairs of corresponding congruent sides. For this example, I want you to help me identify the corresponding congruent sides based on the markings on the figure. Write on the comment section each pair of sides that you can see. Are you finished? Very good, Fernandino teens. The corresponding congruent sides are as follows. Line segment PS is congruent to line segment PS. Line segment PO is congruent to line segment PO. Moreover, they share a common side. Hence, line segment SO is congruent to line segment SO by reflexive property of congruence. The two triangles have 3 pairs of sides that are congruent. Therefore, by SSS congruence postulate, they are congruent. Fernandino teens, those are the first 3 postulates that help us prove triangle congruence. When we return, we will discuss the last theorem in proving triangle congruence and test your understanding on the topics we have discussed. Don't change your channel. Stay tuned!
Maya po oras kaya kayo, Fernandinos. Ako pala ay Elwin Arl Serrano ng City Tourism Office ng Siyudad San Fernando. Ngayong bulan na ini, pagmasusyan tayo ang National Heritage Month na ating temang Victory and Humanity, Upholding Filipino Heritage and Identity. Kambena nini, metong karang aktibidades na ng siyudad, atin ning launching ng bayong Heritage Passport. Yung Heritage Passport, apin ning metong karing proyekto ng kaya katamong siyudad, yung pamanamuna ng Mayor Edwin D. Santiago. Anong nuka rin makalagelangan ding eganagan ng heritage sites, heritage structures, naakit tamo kin kay katamong heritage district. Makakayabe din kini, ding importansya da ding mapil na tradisyon, kini syudad, kalupa na ning pamangawang parol, ang po yung pamangalesa. May awo siyang heritage passport, uling atin kang dapat gawan, anong nukaran puntalan mo lading at tsuking passport, at saka ka mag-selfie. Kay ba't kanta, palto making tourism office, at mamielang sticker ka rin egan-agan ang apuntulan mong lugar. At timong may ngari ang tutong passport. Balo mi ngeni, panahon na ini, tamo makain bisa lumal, uli na ng COVID-19 pandemic. Kaya naman kimbanwa nga ini, agkatan ko ding bikers tamo, edad 18 hanggang 50, imbis na lumaot kayo po, di na nyo lang dita ka oras, di kaya katamong heritage structures, kaya ni syudad. Anya naman karing mumunang 50 bikers ang makayari kaya katamong heritage passport, midinan lang premium only San Fernando loot bag. Inggawan nyo mo bakit ta makapag-register, punta kayo mismo opisina na ng City Tourism, yung munisipyo, at saka kayo magdalang metong valid ID. Kabiyanin kaya kayong heritage passport, ating makasipit ang instruction nung nano pa ing dapat gawan. Anya naman ka rin hanggang kapadyakin, nanano ko pa, tara na!
Fernandino Teens TV.
You are still watching Fernandino Teens TV Season 2. A while ago, we talked about the first 3 postulates that we can use to prove that the 2 given triangles are congruent. And these are the SAS, ASA, and SSS congruence postulates. At this point, we will now discuss the last theorem in proving triangle congruence, which is the AAS or the SAA congruence theorem, also known as the angle-angle-side or side-angle-angle congruence theorem. If two angles and the non-included side of one triangle are congruent to the corresponding two angles and the non-included side of another triangle, then the triangles are congruent. You may wonder why it is called a theorem and not a postulate. Let us briefly differentiate what is a postulate and a theorem. A postulate is a statement suggested or assumed as true as the basis for reasoning, discussion, or belief. While theorem is a statement that can be demonstrated to be true by accepted mathematical operations and arguments. So basically, the difference between postulates and theorem is that postulates are assumed to be true, but theorems must be proven to be true based on postulates and/or already proven theorems. All right, going back to the AAS theorem, let us have this example. Using the marked figures, can the AAS theorem be used to show that triangles are congruent? Let us identify the corresponding parts of the two triangles. In the figure, with the help of the markings, we can identify that angle B is congruent to angle E. Angle C is congruent to angle F. Line segment AB is congruent to line segment DE, which are non-included sides. We can conclude that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF by the AAS theorem because the pairs of corresponding angles and a pair of a non-included sides are congruent. Now, look at the illustration. It is your turn, Fernandino teens. Based on the markings, identify the corresponding congruent parts of these triangles. Write them in the comment section. Good job! In the figure, angle A is congruent to angle H. Angle T is congruent to angle S. Line segment CA is congruent to line segment PH, which is a pair of non-included sides. Therefore, triangle CAT is congruent to triangle PHS. The key term here is the non-included side. For better understanding of the topics discussed, let us have some activities. Which of the following pairs of triangle can prove their congruence by the given postulates or theorem? Number 1, using angle-side angle congruence postulate, if your answer is pair 4, then you are correct. Next, use the side-side-side congruence postulate. Excellent! The answer is pair number 3. Next, which pair of triangles can prove their congruence using side-angle-side congruence postulate? Very good. The answer is pair number 4. For the last item in this activity, use the angle-angle side or side angle-angle congruence theorem. If your answer is pair 1, then you are right. Good job, Fernandino teens. Let us have another activity. This time, we will identify what triangle congruence postulates or theorem can be used to prove that the given triangles are congruent. Write your answers on the comment section below. Are you ready? Great! Let's begin. Number 1. What postulate or theorem can be used to prove that the given triangles are congruent? Wonderful! We can use the SSS congruence postulate because, as you can see on the figure, all the sides of the first triangle are congruent to the corresponding sides of the other triangle. Number 2. What postulate or theorem can be used to prove that the given triangles are congruent? Very good. We can use the SAS congruence postulate. There are two pairs of corresponding congruent sides and a pair of corresponding congruent included angle. Number 3. What postulate or theorem can be used to prove that the given triangles are congruent? Awesome! The answer is ASA congruence theorem. Number 4. What postulate or theorem can be used to prove that the given triangles are congruent? Great job! The answer is AAS or SAA congruence theorem. The pair of the given corresponding congruent sides is a non-included angle. Number 5. What postulate or theorem can be used to prove that the given triangles are congruent? Brilliant! Again, we can use the SAS congruence postulate because there are two pairs of corresponding congruent sides and a pair of corresponding congruent included angle. For the last number, what postulate or theorem can be used to prove that the given triangles are congruent? Very good. The answer is ASA congruence postulate. That is because there are two pairs of corresponding congruent angles and a pair of corresponding congruent included side. You did well, Fernandino teens. For the next activity, given that the triangles are congruent, you are going to identify the pair of included angles or sides that will satisfy the said congruence postulate. Number 1. Using angle-side congruence postulate, what are the pair of included angles in the given figure? Letter A. Angle A and angle B. Letter B. angle B and angle E. Letter C, angle C and angle F. You got it right, Fernandino teens. The correct answer is letter A. Angle A and angle D are the pair of included angles. Number 2. Using again the side-angle-side congruence postulate, what are the pair of included angles in the given figure? Letter A, angle P and angle W. Letter B, angle Q and angle X. And letter C, angle S and angle Y. Perfect! The correct answer is letter B. Angle Q and angle X are the pair of included angles. For the last number, using again the angle side angle congruence postulate, what are the pair of included sides in the given figure? Letter A, line segment AC and line segment DF. Letter B, line segment AB and line segment DE. Or letter C, line segment BC and line segment EF. Excellent! The correct answer is letter A. Line segment AC and line segment DF are the pair of included sides. Up next, let us determine the additional corresponding parts needed to allow us to apply the SAS, ASA, SSS congruence postulate, and the AAS theorem when Fernandino Teens TV Season 2 returns.
Hindi lamang sa larangan ng pangkabuhayan apektado ang maraming pamilyang Pilipino, kundi maging sa larangan ng pagkatuto ng bawat batang Pilipino. Inilunsad ng siyudad ng San Fernando ang programang Nurturing Environment and System for Thriving or NEST, isang education community pantry na naglalayon para sa isang malawakang pagtulong, pagantabay at paggabay na ang focus ay ang makapagbigay ng tulong at suporta sa ating mga mag-aaral sa pamamagitan ng pagbibigay ng educational needs gaya na lamang ng school supplies, tutorial sessions, study tips, at iba pang mga pamamaraan na mas lalong makatutulong sa pag-angat ng ating edukasyon. Dahil hindi hadlang ang pandemya sa magandang kinabukasang naghihintay sa ating mga mag-aaral. Sino-sino nga ba ang mga kalahok sa programang ito? Sa pagtutulungan ng ating school administrators, guro, magulang, at iba pang mga miyembro ng ating komunidad gaya ng barangay officials at sangguniang kabataan ay siguradong magiging mas matagumpay ang programang ito. Paano nga ba ang magiging proseso ng naturang programa? Una, magkakaroon tayo ng isang Facebook group, ang Pampanga High School NEST Education Community Pantry na pangungunahan ng Educational Pantry Coordinator. Ang mga magulang, tagapangalaga at mga guro ay ia-add ng ating Educational Pantry members sa Facebook group na ito. Sa page na ito maaaring i-post ng mga magulang at tagapangalaga o sino mang miyembro ng Educational Pantry ang kanilang mga kahilingan o requests. Kailangan ding ilagay ang pangalan ng mag-aaral, grade at section para sa mas agarang aksyon. Oo nga pala, hindi lang requests ang pwedeng i-post. Pwede ring mag-post ang mga nais magbigay ng tulong o mga gustong mag-donate. Sabi nga nila, sharing is caring. Tandaan na ang Facebook group na ito ay pribado at Posts na may kaugnayan lamang sa page na ito ang maaaprobahan. Mayroon din palang Google Form na ipamamahagi kung saan maaari nating isumite ang ating requests o kahilingan. Paano naman ang mga walang internet access sa bahay? Huwag mangamba dahil merong mga nakalaang drop boxes ang ating paaralan na kung saan maaaring ihulog ng mga magulang at tagapangalaga ang kanilang requests. Sa mga nais namang mag-donate ng school supplies, maaaring ilagay ang mga ito sa tabi ng drop boxes. Maaari ring mag-donate ng mga kagamitan o cash donation kaakibat ang pagsusumite ng deed of donation form. Pangalawa, mahalaga ang ugnayan ng mga guro at ng mga magulang o tagapangalaga sa programang ito. Gamit ang video calls o chats ay ipahahayag ng mga guro ang adhikain ng programang ito sa mga magulang o tagapangalaga. Maaari ring gawin ang orientation na ito ng face-to-face kasabay ng schedule ng kuhanan ng mga module. Gaya ng nabanggit, hindi lamang mga bagay ang maaaring i-donate. Pwede ring mag-conduct ng tutorial session, study tips, at iba pang mga kagamitan sa pagkatuto gaya ng mga aklat o kaya ay gadgets. Ikatlo, ang requested needs ng ating mga magulang o tagapangalaga ay ililista ng ating NEST focal person. Ang mga coordinator naman ang mag-aayos ng mga ito. Ang advisors ng ating mga mag-aaral, guidance counselor, at iba pang mga guro ay ipaaalam sa ating mga magulang at tagapangalaga ang petsa at oras ng pamimigay ng requested needs na gaganapin sa paaralan. Sabi nga nila, it takes a village to raise a child. Kaya naman aktibo at iba yung pakikilahok ang inaasahan sa pagsasanib puwersa ng paaralan at barangay na siyang tutukoy sa pangangailangan ng bawat Fernandinong mag-aaral at kikilos upang matugunan ito sa tulong at suporta rin ng mga miyembro ng komunidad. Isang malawakang komunidad para sa isang produktibong educational community pantry ay tiyak na lilikha ng iba yung pagkilos upang maging mas magaan at madali ang pagkatuto ng bawat kabataang Fernandino. Kaya naman tandaan, magbigay ayon sa kakayahan, kumuha ayon sa pangangailangan.
Fernandino Teens TV.
You are still watching Fernandino Teens TV Season 2. Earlier, by observing the given corresponding parts of the two triangles, we can identify which postulates or theorems can we use to tell whether the triangles are congruent. This time, let us determine the additional corresponding parts needed to allow us to apply SAS, ASA, SSS Congruence Postulate, and the AAS Theorem. Are you ready? Let us begin. For each given figure, give the corresponding parts that must be congruent that will satisfy the congruence postulates and the congruence theorem. In the first figure, to satisfy the SSS congruence postulate, what are the corresponding parts that we need? Correct. Segment PR is congruent to line segment TS. What we need is another pair of corresponding sides to satisfy the SSS congruence postulate. In the second figure, what are the corresponding parts that we need to satisfy the SAS congruence postulate? Very good, Fernandino teens. Line segment ON is congruent to line segment DY. We need this pair of sides to make the angles included angles. Hence, satisfy the SAS congruence postulate. In the third figure, to satisfy the ASA congruence postulate, what are the corresponding parts that we need? Right. Angle U is congruent to angle Z. We need this pair of angles to make the sides included sides. Thus, it satisfies the ASA congruence postulate. For the last figure, Fernandino teens, what are the corresponding parts that we need to satisfy the AAS or SAA congruence theorem? Correct. It is either segment FR is congruent to segment DA, or line segment RI is congruent to line segment AY. What we need here is just another pair of non-included sides to satisfy AAS or SAA congruence theorem. Job well done, Fernandino teens. Tap on your shoulders. You have unlocked a new skill. Let us now summarize our lesson today. Today, we have learned how to identify congruent and corresponding parts of two triangles through markings. Having few corresponding congruent parts, we can conclude if two triangles are congruent. The following are the postulates and the theorem that we have tackled. To summarize all the congruence postulates and theorem, let us play fill in the blanks. First, the SAS congruence postulate or side angle side congruence postulate. If two sides and the blank of one triangle are congruent to the corresponding two sides and the blank of another triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. Very good, Fernandino teens. If two sides and the included angle of one triangle are congruent to the corresponding two sides and the included angle of another triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. Second, the ASA congruence postulate or the angle side angle congruence postulate. If blank and the included side of one triangle are congruent to the corresponding blank and the included side of another triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. Very good. If two angles and the included side of one triangle are congruent to the corresponding two angles and the included side of another triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. Third, the SSS congruence postulate or side-side-side congruence postulate. If blank of a triangle are congruent to the corresponding sides of another triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. Good job! If three sides of a triangle are congruent to the corresponding sides of another triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. Lastly, the AAS or SAA congruence theorem, or angle-angle side congruence theorem. If two angles and a blank of one triangle are congruent to the corresponding two angles and the blank of another triangle, then the triangles are congruent. Brilliant! If two angles and a non-included side of one triangle are congruent to the corresponding two angles and a non-included side of another triangle, then the triangles are congruent. Did you get them all? Great! Now, let us relate what we have learned to real-life situations. Congruent triangles can be used for many different things. In architecture, congruent triangles are used to represent doors and how far they can swing open. They also use shadows that make triangles to find the height of an actual object. If there is a single most important shape in engineering, it is triangle. A single support between two diagonal corners greatly strengthens a rectangle by turning it into two triangles. In real life, let us be a triangle for each other and become a firm and sturdy support to overcome the predicaments of the pandemic. In addition, when any object is kept in front of the mirror image is congruent to the real image. Clearly, when two objects are congruent, they have the same dimensions and shape. So we say that they are exactly alike or equal. These are the references used in the presentation. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have learned so much from our topic today about the triangle congruence postulates and the triangle congruence theorem. I have been your teacher lecturer for today, Teacher Dan. Keep safe, good day, and God bless.
Ganun pala yun, no? Meron tayong tatlong postulates sa triangle congruence. Ito ang SAS, ASA, at SSS postulate.
At meron naman tayong isang congruence theorem na tinatawag na AAS o SAA theorem.
Naka-e-enjoy naman pag-aralan ang triangle congruence, lalo na ang pag-identify ng included side at included angle ng triangles.
Marami rin ba kayong natutuhan, Fernandino Teens? Kaya naman, maraming salamat, sir!
Isa na namang makabuluhang talakayan ng ating natunghayan, Fernandino T.
Samahan niyo ulit kami dito lang sa
Fernandino
TV!
Season 2.
kung saan ang kabataang Fernandino ay angat sa angking talino.
Bagong umaga, yakapin mo ang bagong pag-asa. Simulan mong abutin ang iyong pangarap na magbibigay dangal sa iyong bukas. Ang suliranin, hindi laging nandyan, dapat mong harapin. Kami iyong kasama sa bawat takin, magkaakbay nating lulutasin. Dito sa Fernandino Teens TV, ang boses mo ay mahalaga. Dito sa Fernandino Teens TV, ikaw lagi ang bida. na siyang gagabay sa iyong pagkamulat. Naway umukit ito sa iyong isipan, maging mapanuri